Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along today. It's really nice to be back at Top Drawer. I started out my career as a buyer and visual merchandiser, so I've been here many a time, and I hope you're all having a good show so far. Just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Ailie Williams. I'm a freelance stylist and brand storyteller. I've recently been working in-house at Neptune, the interiors retailer, but as I just mentioned, prior to that, I was doing visual merchandising, buying, as well as social content creation and management for small and startup businesses. Today, I've been invited to come and talk to you about the importance of brand storytelling and how you can translate this through your content creation and your visual merchandising in store. I'm going to speak for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then there'll be some time at the end for questions if you've got any. And I'm going to start by using a couple of case studies and then share some practical tips that you can hopefully put into practice for your own brand. Good. So what is brand storytelling? One way of defining it is using narrative techniques to engage with an audience and help shape a brand's identity beyond traditional marketing approaches. In simple terms, it's basically not using facts, statistics, and testimonials to communicate with the audience, but also sharing the story behind your brand, how it came to be, and what makes it different. It's basically a means of making your brand thoughtful, memorable, and real, and getting across the heart and soul of it and what it is that makes it unique. We're all wired to respond to stories, so if you tell them effectively and they resonate with people, they'll connect with them. And connection leads to trust, and ultimately, trust then leads to sales. I like to think of a brand story as a kind of compass to your whole marketing strategy. And it should help steer the way that you communicate, the content you create, the products you choose, and how you present them. So I'm going to start off with these couple of case studies that I've got and that I think are really good examples of strong brand stories and effective communication strategies. So when I was in-house as a stylist at Neptune, my role was basically all about translating their brand story through their imagery and video content, whether it was for social, the website, or their lifestyle magazine stories. Their purpose and what they pride themselves on being is basically a one-stop shop for the whole home, whether it's flooring, furniture, or the finishing touches. One of the key threads in their brand story is about connecting their products to a classic British lifestyle that's sort of founded upon timelessness and quality. And ultimately, this is kind of engaging their customers to envisage and aspire to owning Neptune products in their own home. So when we were planning our content shoots and when we were styling them, we always had to have this lifestyle element in our minds. And one of the first things we would do is choose a location for the shoots. And when we did this, we always tried to think of the place we were shooting in being either something or an environment that our customers lived in or aspired to live in. So for us, it was all about sort of light and bright, townhouses with sash windows and painted floorboards, or cozy Cotswold manor houses with open fires and rustic beams. Of course, you can shoot things in studios and things, but for Neptune, the lifestyle thread of their story was so important that choosing real homes made all the difference. In the same way, when we were propping for a shoot, we'd always think about using realistic props, so mixing old with new, and not just solely using Neptune products. And we'd also try and make the space look as lived in as possible. So whether it was kicked off shoes in the corner, pile of papers on the kitchen table, or sofas with not perfectly plumped cushions, they might be slightly squashed. So this is an image from one of the more recent shoots. It's a Neptune kitchen, Neptune table, and a couple of the accessories are Neptune. But we shot it in a really aspiring location with lovely beams and floorboards. And we laid the table in a kind of relaxed way, and we mixed in old and new with the antique brass. And again, and with the family dog and everything sort of milling around, this just allows people to kind of subconsciously buy into the kitchen as well as the lifestyle. People don't live in show homes, and they've accumulated things over time. So being able to see old and new pieces mixed in and still work is a really key element for Neptune. Equally, the lifestyle element of their brand story is conveyed in their shops as well. So much so that when they went about creating their shops, they strove to create an environment that felt more like a home than a store. Again, this was all about sort of helping people imagine how Neptune pieces would sit in their own home and allow them to dream of creating a similar space themselves and ultimately buying into the brand. So they have working coffee machines in the kitchen, and you're encouraged to sort of help yourself if you want to make one. The TV rooms have classic films playing, and beside every sofa and armchair, there's normally a really good book or a copy of their lifestyle magazine, Stories. And I think one thing they also do is they don't underestimate the importance of how the shop feels. So they really sort of make an emphasis on how the layout is, the furniture they choose, as well as the welcome people receive as they walk in, the scent, and the music that's playing. And I think this is something that every brand should really consider, as people these days are all about rewarding shopping experiences, and these small details do make all the difference. So as I just mentioned, their magazine Stories, which some of you might recognize, it's another really good way of an example of them selling the lifestyle and the Neptune way of life, but in quite a subtle way. So it's full of articles that speak to the Neptune brand, but not necessarily about the brand. So there's articles that include intrepid adventurers, hinting at the brand's ambition to aim high, tales of heritage buildings that are built to last, that sort of, again, allude to that quality element that's so important to the brand, as well as seasonal playlists and healthy recipes, which is a particular passion of the founders. And Neptune product was always used really sparingly in these shoots, and the focus was all about portraying the lifestyle, being generous, and sharing interesting articles and knowledge. Neptune is a more premium brand, but they definitely don't disregard those who might not be in their target market. And over the last few years, with the importance and the rise in popularity of video, a big emphasis was put on sharing videos on social that anybody could buy into. So whether it's an organizational tip, a styling how-to, or a craft, and we did a few over Christmas that were really popular on their social channels. And again, this just allows anybody to buy into the brand and get the look, whether they bought from Neptune or not. And ultimately, it makes them think positively about the brand and aim to buy into it at some point, whether it's a candle or a kitchen. So it might seem a bit counterintuitive to not be targeting your core audience all the time, but over time, hopefully they will buy into your brand and then become a customer later on. So changing direction now slightly, I also thought I would share an example of how I've been influenced by a brand story and the strategies they use to engage me. So when I was a buyer for a small independent retailer, I came across the Botanical Candle Company on Instagram. And it immediately caught my eye. They've got a beautiful feed and color palette. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the brand, it's a sort of homegrown business that developed from a kitchen table side hustle and has now developed into a fully fledged business with a workshop and a shop in Shaftesbury, as well as, I think, about 100 stockists over the UK and Europe. They make really high quality and environmentally friendly candles and diffusers. And in their shop, they also stock beautiful but useful items for the home. So I followed along for a few months on Instagram and then eventually placed my first order with them. But what was it that sort of grabbed my attention and made me want to buy into their brand? Ultimately, I think their story is one largely of transparency and care. And the way they communicated this is, in my opinion, a real key driver behind their success. On their Instagram, they're really big about showing the behind the scenes, images and videos from their small workshop, and provide an insight into the candle making process and the labor of love that goes into each one. They share the ups and downs, logistical issues, supply chain troubles. At one point, they couldn't get hold of the jars that they produce most of their candles in, but they were really honest about it. And also the ins and outs of just day-to-day life of running a business. And I think because of their transparency, I trusted them to not only supply me with the finest product, but also knew they were putting that all into every candle and its delivery with no shortcuts being taken. But the care they give also goes far beyond just the candles they make. They care and have real consideration for the environmental impacts of their business, and this is key to what they do and the stories they tell. They share how it's at the forefront of every business decision, and in a recent reel, I think they announced that they're working with a couple of partner companies to help them become carbon neutral in their deliveries. But not only are they doing their best for the planet, they're really not compromising on the customer experience either. And I can hands down say I think they're some of my favorite orders to receive. They're always beautifully packaged, really thoughtful, just quite simple, sort of brown paper packaging, but branded tape and a sprig of eucalyptus on each order. And again, then this is something that they mirror in store with their carrier bags, having a sprig of eucalyptus on those as well. They also then pass on the knowledge and include a little postcard detailing how you can reuse and recycle every element of their packaging. Their shop itself in Shaftesbury also speaks to this environmental thread of their story. Displays are made using reclaimed materials, lots of mixed textures, and vintage pieces act as the backdrop to their products. Everything is secondhand, but they haven't compromised on the style of their shop at all. Similarly, when it comes to the products that they stock, they share how they make a really conscious effort to choose items with purpose, longevity, and timelessness. And they let this element of their brand story really drive their buying rather than the goods themselves. So if something doesn't fit this criteria, you just won't find it on their shop shelves. But for those products that do, both online and in store, they really share an introduction and champion sort of why they chose it. So they share an introduction to the maker, why it caught their eye, how they use it in their everyday, and other ways it might work in yours too. And then going back to the sort of craft and the maker element of things, people are really important to them. And they state on their website that people are put before profit at every turn. And they really champion their employees, regularly sharing their achievements, both within the business and outside of it. And as a result, I think they have a close-knit, efficient team that you feel like you get to know and are a pleasure to engage with, whether it's online or social. But it's also not just the people within their own business. They're huge advocates for the local community and the town in which they call their business home. On social media, they really champion other independents in the area, sharing guides on how to spend a weekend in Shaftesbury, promoting restaurants, shops, attractions. And they think beyond the business and understand that the success of their shop is entangled with the success of other people in the business, in the town as well. And they really generate a sense of local pride by showing people on their social media channels why they should visit Shaftesbury. And the trust they've built through being so transparent and honest means customers are way more likely to take their recommendations on board. And I, for one, have done this and had a lovely day out there. So I could go on and talk about all the different threads within those case studies and talk about their other brand story elements. But for now, I think that's all I've got time for. I hope you can see why I chose those case studies. They're obviously two very different brands with very different budgets as well, but both telling their story really effectively. So now I thought I'd move on to the more practical tips that hopefully you guys can then take away and help to use to enhance your brand story and the way you communicate it. So you might now be thinking that your brand story and it maybe needs to be slightly clearer, or you're maybe unsure of what your brand story really is. And I find the use of 3 Ps can really help shape it. So the first P is purpose. This is the reason you do what you do. It's about identifying your purpose, why you started your business, what problems your business helps solve, and who you aim to serve. It will help build trust with your customers, and they can understand your motivations, and it can give them a really reason to believe and invest in you. The second P is promise. Promise is different from your purpose because it's more about focusing on what you have to offer outside of your specific product or service. So it's what the customers can buy into alongside what you're already selling. So in the case of Neptune, it's buying into the lifestyle. But it could be your environmental commitment, your experience as a whole, or just the packaging something comes in. To help define it, I think it's really important to think about the experience and the value you want to deliver your customers and how you want them to feel after engaging with your brand. And the third P is personality. So this is what makes your business unique. It's you, it's the people you work with, it's the makers you stock, the kind of collective personalities of the people behind your business. So the Botanical Candle Company, a really good example of that. So this all helps draw in your target audience and allows them to connect with you, helping build trust and brand association. Customers feel as though they're buying into you, and everything just becomes more personable. Of course, in some cases, these 3 categories can overlap. You might find your brand story fits more with 1 or 2 than all 3, but they're just a useful trio to help focus your thinking when it comes to developing your brand story. So you've got your story, but what do you do next? As the cases of Neptune and the Botanical Candle Company demonstrate, crafting a brand story and the narrative is just one element of it. You've then got to be able to deliver it as well. So you'll most likely want to create a library of emotive and relevant imagery and potentially some video as well to help you translate your story. Whether it's product shots, lifestyle images, everything you share on your social platform and online, and the way your shop feels and is displayed should link back some way to that story. I always find the easiest way to do this is sort of pick out the key themes within your brand story and then plan your content and your VM in store accordingly so that it's evenly spread out across the calendar. So you're regularly highlighting and reinforcing those narratives. We all know that social media feeds should feel cohesive and consistent, and posting regularly and producing quality content is a huge part of that. So in order to make sure you're achieving the right look that aligns with your brand, creating a mood board that you can then refer back to again and again and use as inspiration for your visuals is a really good thing to do. It's also something that you can then pass on to any freelancers you might work with that could just give them a feel of what you're all about visually. So you might want to go old school and cut and stick, or go on Pinterest and really hone in on those things that stand out to you and align with your brand. So it might be colors, scenery, a typeface, an outfit, or just a particularly lovely interior. But if it sings out to you and it fits with your brand, get it on a board. And it's just something you can keep referring back to make sure you're staying on the right track. Then when it comes to actually shooting the content, I think writing an in-depth shot list is one of the best things you can do. If you detail what the shot will focus on, where it will be used, so maybe it's a newsletter or social, because the formats might be slightly different. And then also think about the sentiment behind each image and how this helps tell your brand story. Then you'll need to think about planning where you're going to have your shoot. So it might be at home, a workspace, or if you're like Neptune and the lifestyle's a big emphasis for you, maybe think about hiring a photo shoot location that fits with the brand story. Then also thinking about props that you might like to use that help enhance your imagery and convey your service or product further. Shoot days are, of course, a bit of an investment if you're having photographers, etc. So planning them and making sure you're really efficient on those days is really key so you get as much out of them as possible. Of course, you might choose to also share more sort of behind-the-scenes style content, which is great, but I think there's also a place for that sort of slightly more considered and polished content too. Then when it comes to translating your story within a bricks and mortar environment, first things first, you've got to think about obviously the products that you're going to fill your space with. So when you're creating your collections, I think if you let your story drive the product selection rather than the other way around, that's really good practice, because I'm honest and I can say that I've also been tempted by things for clients in the past and love the product, but it might not have perfectly sat with their brand story. And things have got to feel authentic to you and your brand. And of course, then the interiors play a huge part as well. So your choice of wall color, the furniture, the textures have all got to tie in with your brand, but also show off your product in its best light. And then when people have brought into your brand and they become regulars and often coming back into your store, you've got to give them a reason to keep coming back. And creating different experiences is a great way of doing this. So if you choose fixtures and fittings that allow you to be fluid in the way you display things, go for adjustable shelving, movable tables, that sort of thing, and then create dramatic and interesting displays that are engaging. And then you might try and sort of tie this in with your social content as well. So feature a particular maker 1 week, do a few posts about them on social, and then also create a beautiful display in store highlighting their work, and maybe even get them in to do a sort of meet and greet style thing. Also, having point of sale at that point is a great way of doing it, because it can then highlight why you chose the product and really connect the customer with what they're looking at. It's also something for them to take away if they then don't decide to purchase on that day, but they've got something to hold on to that reminds them of your shop and why they liked it. I think I'm probably coming to the end of my time slot now, so I ought to think about wrapping up. But all these tips maybe seem a little bit general when you just think of on surface level, but I think the key thing to know is that when they're underpinned by a really strong brand story, you've got it nailed, because everything is so much more easy to implement once you've got that brand story in place. So I think that's it for me today. Thank you so much for coming along. I'm going to be around if you want to ask any questions. I'm more than happy to answer anything. And my details are up there if you want to connect with me on social. Thank you.